All right. So since we do record this, why don't we go ahead and get it kicked off again? As people have questions, please use chat and Q&A, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and the slide. I'm going to intro our wonderful panelists who I'm a little bit familiar with, and then let them take over. So we're going to be talking about all things ABM. As a marketer, I like to joke that account selection is where ABM goes to die, but these folks have figured it out. So I'm really excited to have them speak. So I'm going to kick off introductions, but if each of you could say a little something about yourselves and a hobby you have or an interesting fact about yourself, that would be fabulous. Doug, why don't we start with you? Then we'll go to Eric, then Jeff.
Okay, my name is Doug. I am a fractional CMO. I've been working with the Caliber Mine team now for almost 15 months. Amazing journey along the way. And my hobby is whitewater kayaking.
I did not know that. That's fantastic. Eric?
Hi, my name is Eric Westerkamp. I've been a CEO of Calgary now for 5+ years, I believe. And my hobby, actually, the reason I moved to Colorado originally from college was to rock climb.
Jeff?
So I'm Jeff Loeb, along with Doug. I'm a CMO and partner at Chief Outsiders. I work with B2B companies to create and execute growth strategies. Ton of experience implementing ABM programs. I published an ebook on ABM best practices. And in my spare time, I like to play guitar and cycle.
Wonderful. All right, Doug, I'm going to let you intro the topic and take it away.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm going to mention a couple of things. The first is that ABM is really difficult, and it is not for the light of the shy or the folks that aren't courageous. It's a big undertaking, and that's part of the reason that we're on with Jeff today, Jeff Loeb. I had gone through and tried to activate an ABM channel twice earlier in my career. And it takes that experience to understand just how difficult it is to stand up something like ABM, which sort of sets up why we're here today with Jeff and with Eric. End of the day, the customer, if you will, was Eric. It was up to Jeff and I to deliver an ABM motion that was productive and allowed the company to continue its growth trajectory. And what I want to share with everybody, and I'm looking for the panelists to help out here as well, is what are you looking for from a sort of a heuristic and data indicator standpoint along the following journey? The first part of the journey is the design piece. This is the period of time where you're greatly optimistic. The world is your oyster. And then you get to activation. And the things that you thought would work in design don't work in the activation phase, or things work better than you think they will. And then you've got to go and optimize and figure things out. And so along that way, we want to make sure we share our learnings about what data, what heuristics to pay attention to. And so with that in mind, Jeff, I want you to set us up. When you and I first had a conversation about this February of 2023 at the National Conference for Chief Outsiders, you really did a great job sort of laying out, hey, ABM has got to be a fit. And you sort of talked through the vectors of what a fit equals. Can you share that with us today?
Yeah, happy to. So, let me start off really at 100,000 feet, and what makes ABM attractive in the first place, and it's this idea that it's sometimes called zero waste marketing, because you're dedicating 100% of your focus, 100% of your resources, 100% of your attention on your ideal targets, right? So you're really honing in and focusing in message-wise and all element-wise, advertising, et cetera, on who we think are the best customers. And in some way, it's kind of a reaction, to the inbound, marketing movement of the last, 10, 15 years, which was really very broad-based. So you'd reach out to everybody, you'd engage with a lot of people, and then you'd have to nurture them to kind of find out the 1% that are actually real buyers. So ABM flips that on its head, and it really focuses right off the bat on who our most attractive clients are, right? So that's the appeal. So when you're trying to figure out whether ABM is a fitter or not, there's two vectors, in my opinion, that you really have to think about. And one vector is around kind of the nature of the solution that you're selling. Is it the type of solution that warrants an ABM motion? And the second vector is the sophistication of your go-to-market capabilities, right? So Doug, as you mentioned, ABM is not for the faint of heart. It requires some level of sophistication. So if you have a very unsophisticated or immature, undeveloped go-to-market motion, it may not be the right place to start. Go ahead, Doug.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, really at the end of the day, those are the two gating factors. No, they're not the only factors, but one is, and this is the heuristic I use, Jeff. It is to say, are my deal cycles? Am I able to say specifically that I know who I need to go after? And we're going to talk about the mechanics of this in a minute. One, and two, what is the nature of that sales cycle? Do you have a fairly complex and rich sales cycle? That's one heuristic. And the other is basically, can I pull it off, right? Can I actually execute on it? And Jeff, one of the things he said to me when I was talking about Caliber Mine and the size of the organization, one of the things he said was like, gee, I'm a little worried that they could pull it off. And so one thing I want to note is sophistication isn't always about size as well. In other words, if you have a highly developed, sophisticated organization in the background and you have the right market, you can pull this off. So the question for you, Jeff, is sort of what kind of ABM? Because there are all sorts of different options for us when we're thinking about what type of ABM to deploy.
Yeah, so typically when we talk about flavors of ABM, and you guys are all probably familiar with this, we talk about one-to-one, one-to-few, and one-to-many. The decision about that comes down to both the sophistication of your team and the nature of your solution, and also the size of the target market you're going after. So for an example, so one-to-one, typically there's a small number of strategic accounts that you're targeting, and they tend to be really big deals, right? So I've done a few one-to-one implementations where we were selling robotic warehouse management system that only 20-25 organizations in the world, would buy. So it was a very targeted market with very big deal sizes, $1 to $25 million, right? So that was perfect for one-to-one ABM motion, where we could highly customize our overall motion. We'd build out landing pages, microsites, for each of our targets, for instance. And it requires or usually means a high level of personalization as well. So all the kind of messaging and content and buyer's journey that you create is really super focused and personalized. On the other extreme, sometimes you want to go after a very large audience that might have thousands or tens of thousands of companies associated with it. In that case, you'd use a one-to-many motion, where you still have a lot of the kind of core motion of ABM, but it's not as personalized, and it's more built to be done at scale than to be, kind of super personalized. And in the middle, you have one-to-few, which typically you might personalize by market segment, whether it's by vertical, by use case, something like that. So those are the three typical flavors of ABM.
Okay, it's good. That's an excellent summary. So let's sort of head into the journey that Caliber Mine experienced with ABM. And I'm going to tell you, we ended up, based on the vectors that Jeff talked about in terms of can you execute, the answers were emphatically yes. And then based on our market, deal size, complexity of the buyer's journey, we went with a one-to-few, borderline one-to-many motion. So I'll describe our first tranche as being 125 accounts, and then we grew that to 250 over time. So sort of on that borderline. And what I want to do is turn it over to Eric, because one of the things that Kamala talked about at the beginning, which is really one of the things that a lot of folks trip up on, is how do you decide who you're going to be marketing to? Who's the ABM motion going towards? And Eric, I'll hand it over to you to talk about our journey together. But I would say we had a big advantage in that we had a crystal clear idea of our ICP and our TAM heading in. But it's not always that simple. And what I'd love for you to do is talk about how it took us really understanding the buyer's journey to understand how to pick the right accounts for each tranche.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I'll say that when we first started this, we looked at how, that was the big question. How do we actually figure out which our TAM is pretty big, 14, 15,000 customers, right? And then we narrow that down, our ICP. Well, we really focus on more kind of enterprise organizations. Okay, we take that down based on some firmographics and technographics, right? But even there, you're talking thousands of accounts. And so the question is, how do you then take that down to, okay, I want to get a list of 50 for this sales rep or 25 for this sales rep. Our first cut of it was to go after sort of sub-vertical markets, right? So we said, hey, let's really take a look at within this section, here's a subsection of the market that we tend to do very well in. Let's even cut that further and let's get a list of accounts. And that's the first way we went at it. And I'd say that it was partially successful, right? I'd say that we got some early indicators that we were increasing engagement and that we were actually getting some success with that subsection, right? But we actually shifted over time and said that the better indicator for us, to be honest, is intent and engagement, right? And so what we did is we really drilled into our buyer journeys. And so where we were getting success, we really looked at like all the touch points, all the way from intent through early engagement and engagement on our website and engagement with our sales teams, and used that as a proxy to figure out how do we identify companies that are kind of already starting up here, right? And that are naturally maybe get, then we want to kind of move over that, that fulcrum, kind of get them over the bar to where they're more engaged. We want to focus on those subset of accounts because they're, to be honest, more likely to convert. There's some indication that something's going on, right? And this is a great, I think you're showing an example of the buyer journey here. So, we've got, because of the nature of what we do as a company, we actually have incredible buyer journey data on all the accounts that we've engaged with over the past 5 years. And we really started to drill into that and try to figure out what's that subset of accounts that we can target, right? And this is a great example of all the touch points. I think we're looking at an account here. We're seeing intent surging. This is coming actually out of Bombora intent data. We've got data coming out of G2, and then we can see the paid social, and we can sort of see that whole buyer journey. The challenge, of course, is how do you actually take this and summarize these, hundreds or maybe sometimes thousands of touch points across lots of different buyers into something you can actually kind of leverage, right? There we go. So something that we did that really helped our teams out is we started taking a lot of these buyer journeys and actually running them through Google, in this case, Google's Gemini large language models to summarize all that data. And we did this internally to see like how it worked. And we're actually now rolling it out as part of our product for all of our customers. But this really helped us start to take these big buyer journeys and say, what are the key marketing activities and buyer groups and things that indicated for us when people were starting to get interested, what the engagement looked like. And then we took this from an ABM perspective and said, okay, what are the early indicators that we can use in here to indicate that we've got a natural grouping of 50 or 100 accounts that we want to go target from an ABM perspective. And so this is kind of a cool thing where we took all the touch points for a customer, summarized it into these buyer journeys, and use these buyer journeys to really inform how we're actually creating lists now that we're going after for ABM motions.
So I want to pause this and make sure we capture what I think is a really important learning, at least it was for Caliber Buying, which is even if you have crystal clarity in your ICP, and Eric spoke about how we had some sub industries within that ICP that were high performing for us, and we did fine with that tranche. That did just fine. But our learning was what we were seeing using tools like this was we were actually getting much better results if there was prior engagement. And the higher engagement, the more likely we were to actually generate pipeline. And so we shifted pretty quickly. We went from maybe being a bit overly precious and saying, look, we want to do these sub industries, to saying, actually, no, we want engagement to be the leading indicator. And that has resulted in much better success for us. So I want to just capture that moment and say, when I sort of set up this conversation, I talked about the changes between design and activation. And this is a really good example of the change we had to make in the activation phase. So I want to back us up a little bit. Let's go to the next slide, Kamala. We sort of jumped into some learnings, but what I want to do now is have a discussion between the three of us to talk about really the beginning of this journey. And this was my learning. Jeff, thank you for joining us on this journey, by the way. So important. And I thought we all did such a great job of going, hey, how do we pull this first phase off well? And I will tell you folks, even a very limited proto ABM has at least 3 or 4 kind of overlapping motions, which is a lot. So how do you start well enough without overcomplicating so that when you drop your first, we call them tranches, you're learning enough to move on to the activation optimization phase. So Jeff, talk to us about how we went through the goal setting process as a start for the MVP. Sort of walk us through that process that you led us through.
Yeah, and this is such an important topic, because my experience with these programs, ABM programs, is that you always start off with a lot of interest, right? And people are kind of psyched and excited about it, and a big success indicator and part of the upfront stage is kind of getting the excitement, because ABM is a strategy, it's not a tactic. So it's something that we have to have buy-in from the CEO, from the head of sales, from the head of the head of marketing. So we have to kind of build up that excitement. And you kind of have to see results pretty quickly, right? So one of the goals is defining those timetables, and I like to build an MVP process such that we've launched the first tranche within 2 to 3 months, right? We get it going quickly, because ABM programs can be so complex with all the different orchestrated touches and all the content that's needed and all the work that you have to do. It can easily, if you don't manage it, become 6 months out from when you've launched the project and you're still, not really kind of generating results. So the MVP is critically important in order to go through that crawl, walk, run process and get off to a super fast start.
So Eric, that's theory and practice. It was interesting because you were sort of in this Venn diagram. You were very heavily involved in the motion, partially because it was this crossover between what our customers experience, what our product does, and what you needed as a client. So it was really interesting to work with you through these phases, because you could see sort of your hats changing depending on where we were. So I'm really curious about that MVP from your standpoint. The goals and how they were set and the metrics that we were using to decide whether we were succeeding or failure. Just give me that impression of that process and whether you thought we got the right goals out of the gate, because we're tranche 6 now, Eric. So look way back to the first tranche.
Tranche 1.
See, how did those goals set?
It's
Yes,
even
exactly.
called pilot in our system. Yeah, so I think that I'll be honest, I'm not sure we understood at the beginning what the goals should be. I knew what I wanted. Right, like, I want as much pipeline as I can get. How much pipeline can I get out of this? I'm the CEO. We're trying to drive revenue. So I know what I want to get, but I don't think we had a very good understanding of what was really achievable and what the ramp is going to look like, right? And so what I would say is, you need to, I think what I've seen other companies fail is they don't add the instrumentation to measure early enough, right? If you're not measuring everything as it goes, you don't really know how you can start to scale this, what the ramp is going to look like, what you can really get out of it. And even if some of your earlier tactics are starting to deliver results even much further downstream, right? So I'll give you, we had an example. We were on our forecast call I think it was just yesterday, and we were looking at the ABM programs, and we're like, you know what? The pipeline from the first couple of tranches is actually going up now, 5 or 6 months later, which means that some of those tactics have a real long tail, right? That you want to actually understand, right? And if you're not measuring that, right, you don't know what it is. And I think my only takeaway is I would do a few of those first couple of iterations, then try to look at setting your goals, right? Now, as a CEO, you got to say, like, for the minimum viable success of this has to be around here, because if it's not here, it's not worth putting in the time and the resources. But then what should the goals really be? And I'm not sure you really know, or at least I didn't know until we started getting into those tranches. We can start to see what the output is going to even look like, but you got to measure to see what you can, what that can really be using a tool,
Yeah.
or a pipeline tool or something like that.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is have a solid set of goals heading in, but don't be married to the goals. They can change over time.
Yeah.
One thing, Jeff, you talked about just a moment ago, we really indicated that it was about keeping things as simple as you can out of the gate. And we have talked in the past how that's actually a really important tactic when it comes to scaling later on. So I think that's pretty clear to the audience. I don't think we have to unpack that idea. We've all done this before. We've released software, right? We're not trying to release the full set of software. We understand starting small to scale fast. But what I'd love to understand is, let's get outside of the four walls of Caliber Mind now, and sort of, I would love you to talk about what those sort of early indicators are of success that you can scale. Like, what are those things you're sort of helping clients see to go, okay, this is the moment when we press on the gas?
Yeah, great question. You know, and going back to Eric's earlier point as CEO, right? He's looking to build revenue and bookings as kind of the ultimate, you know, goal. And you kind of walk back from there and you say, all right, well, you know, to drive bookings, I need pipeline, and so those are our opportunities. And before that, I need leads, and all those things take time. Especially in an ABM program where we do everything possible to target people that have higher intent. But face it, we're reaching out to them cold, and they may be in market, they may not be in market. So you have to then think through your question through that lens, because what are those early indicators? What are the first signs that the program is resonating? And as Eric said, you know, we're now in tranche 6 starting to see some of the tranche 1, tranche 2 effort turn into opportunities and deals. So it really comes down to engagement and really being able to measure engagement well, and engagement across all touch points, whether it's open rates on emails, whether it's responses to advertising, whether it's pages viewed on the website, whether it's looking at activity on G2, for example, right? So it's being able to see all that data and then also to aggregate it at the account level, because a lot of our marketing automation systems have more of an orientation at the individual contact level. Part of an ABM program is that we're trying to surround the prospect and hit maybe 5 or 10 different influences or decision makers. So we want to have an aggregate view of engagement so we can measure engagement at the account level.
So does that square with your experience, Eric? Meaning, as much as possible, lean into engagement as an early indicator?
I mean, from my perspective, of course, but I mean, we're, you know, an engagement platform, right? And so it was a natural fit for us. But I think I would be hard pressed to understand how you would understand if you're succeeding without something like that, right? Whether it's our tool or some other tool. If you know, otherwise you're going to have teams scrambling like, okay, now I got to go figure out how many website hits. And now where's all my, I've got all these impressions coming from ads. Well, I'm running stuff on LinkedIn and Google. They're going to be correlating and collating all this data nonstop for any size program to try to figure out, okay, am I getting engagement? So I would say that having something that allows you to automate the process of aggregating all that engagement data and then tying it back out to your different motions, and then tying those out to the different tranches you're kind of running through ABM, it's kind of critical. Because I mean, otherwise, you know, the first time you may know whether it's working is when it hits pipeline. Depending on your sales cycle, that could be 3, 4, 5 months in. I mean, you're not learning and iterating fast enough if you're using just pipeline as your measurement for ABM programs, because you're just not seeing all those early indicators about whether or not you're getting responses. Or if you're trying to measure it with all these different kind of point applications, the challenge you're going to get into is there's just so many of them. You're going to want to be changing these different tactics around kind of nonstop as you're tuning and trying to figure out what's working. for your market, right? You're going to be constantly nonstop kind of jumping between all these things, trying to figure out what's working or not, right? So yeah, having something to measure the engagement, I think, is critical for the success.
So before we move on to the next topic, I just want to get your perspective on something I've seen as somebody sitting in revenue operations, and that's I've watched companies go all in an ABM and get really excited, and that's where the sales team and the marketers solely focus. And like you mentioned, it takes months and months for that pipeline to come to fruition. So how do you balance that as leaders? Is question one. And then question two is, how do you keep the salespeople engaged even though it's not working this minute and they have goals this minute?
Sure.
Can I take that one, guys? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
So I thought a couple of things that were really clever about the way that we ultimately decided to approach it. I think the first was that we were very, very intentional in including sales at every stage. And two good reasons for that. One is the seller's buy-in. And the second piece is, guess what? We have incredible engagement data. We have all sorts of data, but it's the qualitative you're looking for. And so the sellers can provide that qualitative layer that otherwise you wouldn't get. And I would say, I thought we did a good job as a group here, the three of us, of setting expectations that were high, but not wallowing in moments when things weren't working. And I'll give a quick example, which is we're still trying to figure out what the right exact hook is per tranche. We call it the high value offer. We're still figuring out. Guess what? The tranches are still really productive, right? So we could have at some point been like, well, we can't figure this piece out. And so you have to bring the sellers and you have to keep them engaged, but you have to really, at the end of the day, make sure that your expectations are in line. That was my experience. I don't know, Jeff and Eric, did you have different experiences through our journey?
No, I think that's right on. I think involving the sellers was critical. I mean, I think the other thing is that we never really thought of ABM as like the motion that's going to generate all the revenue. We've got a model that we monitor of all of our different channels and how much pipeline they're generating, the ROI by channel, right? And ABM is really one, kind of crosses channels, but it's one motion within there, right? And we expect it to produce X% of our pipeline this year, but it's not the whole thing, right? Because you've got you still need performance marketing going on. You still need partnership programs going on. You still need all these other channels to generate pipeline as an organization. ABM is just one motion that you can use, but it's not the motion, right? Now, I don't think for any organization, it should be the only motion, right? Because if it's not working, then where are you, right? Now it may come up and be over time, it may become a more and more successful or larger percentage of all of your channels. That's great because that means it's working. Right, but it's not the channel. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, just building off of that's exactly right. And what I like to do is I have a demand waterfall model, and that the waterfall model tells me exactly how many opportunities we need to create in order to hit our target. And then I drill down to the next level and say, well, what are the sources of those opportunities? And ABM will be one of those sources. And we decide, well, do we want it to be 5%, 10%, 20%? And initially it's an estimate, right? You kind of give your best guess as to what you think it can produce, but you still need to produce the other 50, 70, 90%, of the opportunities through other channels.
Yeah. I think the one thing I will say is that the reason ABM is so compelling is that if it works, it's elastic in the fact that you can really start to flex it more if it's starting to work, right? A lot of your other channels are not nearly as elastic. You get to some point where they're generating kind of what they're going to generate, and you could throw incrementally more dollars at it, but it's going to incrementally not generate more ROI for you, right? The ROI is going to start to go down in those channels. And the nice thing, the kind of the promise of ABM is that if you get it working, there's more elasticity. I can start to put more effort and time, more salespeople, more things at it, right, to kind of get that motion working. That's the promise of it. I think what I see, Kamala, to your real question is, you see some companies that really, they see that promise and they're like, man, that's nirvana. That's where I want to be. And they go all in. Well, it takes a while, and it may never get to the point where it's more than X percentage of all of your pipeline generation, right? So if you put all your resources there, you may be setting yourself up for failure. And there's so much pressure on the program that after 3 months, if it's not really producing, man, the world's burning, switch, change, do something else. And you see that a lot as people put so much pressure on ABM to be the thing that's going to generate most of their pipeline. They don't give it time to really start to develop and work.
I think we've covered MVP quite a bit, and I want to move quite well, and I move over and talk about. So we talked about leading indicators. I want to talk about trailing indicators. So what I'm going to do is sort of recap what we just talked about when it comes to data. And the thing that I'm hearing in a crystal clear way is lean into your engagement data as a leading indicator. Lean hard into that. But that is one aspect. And so what I'm going to do is just share my experience so far as we get to sort of this idea. And let's get specific about trailing indicators. I'm going to set us up by saying this. In my mind's eye, every time I've gone into an ABM motion, the activation of a channel, I felt like I was escaping the funnel. The idea of the funnel is now gone. I don't have to worry about people making their way through the funnel. That's really been my learning, is that in fact, no, ABM is still having to honor the fact that you've got to get people interested. They have to progress through the funnel. They have to ultimately show up in your pipeline as an MQA before they show up as anything else. And so that has really taught me that my trailing and leading indicators are very similar to what I would see in an inbound motion, but it's sort of the dynamics in between that are different. So Eric, you talked about as the CEO or as the major stakeholder, one of the big indicators is pipeline, but at the end of the day, that's really a trailing indicator. So
Yes.
what were the other trailing indicators that you looked at and said, okay, this is a program that's working or it's not?
I mean, there's not a lot of metrics to measure when you start getting down there. It's pipeline, it's the number of accounts, right? The other things that we start looking at is the number of people getting engaged. Are we getting better engagement across the buyer groups? Let's say is the one thing that's sort of not an obvious indicator, right? So, we're an attribution vendor. So of course we're measuring attribution and we're splitting attribution and we're looking at how much attribution is every tranche we're running generating. We're seeing over time if they're becoming more and more successful, if we're getting more and more out of them, what are those averages, right? But another thing that we really look at is who are the buyer groups within those companies that are getting pipeline, and is that buyer group getting more, I'll say, on target? Is it encompassing earlier more of the people that we know are involved in decisions for our process, right? Because the goal of ABM to some extent is to get more focused on fewer accounts. In theory, what you're also doing there is you're getting more engagement, but you're also getting broader within the organization, right? You're getting more of the people engaged. And so we look at that, per account, how many people are actually engaged once we start to get to revenue, right? And is that a bigger number than, say, performance marketing or other channels are actually generating for us?
That's great. Jeff, what's your experience outside of Caliber Mine?
Well, I think it kind of bleeds into meetings, right? So at the early stages, we're trying to drive engagement, but we're trying to matriculate that engagement into something tangible, right? And that tangible thing is a meeting, right? So we want a meeting. So that's like one of the next kind of key important things from my perspective. Okay, is we're getting engagement, but is that engagement kind of turning into the meeting? And that kind of connects to the idea that you briefly mentioned a moment ago around having a high value offer that really drives the setting up of a meeting.
Okay, great. Let's talk next about scaling. We've spent quite a bit of time talking about making sure people understand to be sort of simple, have very concrete, but not too ambitious goals when it comes to your MVP phase. But there is a point along the journey where you've got to make that decision to scale, right? And so for Caliber Mine, there was a point where we went from 125 to 250 accounts, meaning we felt good enough for where we were with the given tranche that we doubled the number of accounts. And so that was a fairly easy decision for us because we were seeing a lot of pipeline, we were seeing a lot of engaged buyers, so it made sense for us to scale. But that's not always the case for every ABM motion. Sometimes you're really in that MVP phase. So I'm curious, Jeff, lead us off here. What are some of those signs when you feel like you should be leaning into scaling? What are some of those indicators?
Yeah. So great question, and I think we haven't yet talked about orchestration and the idea of orchestration, which is one of the I would say one of the key concepts behind ABM. And orchestration is the set of all the touch points across all of your channels that you've kind of created in terms of the program. And this is one of the, the core things that you have to kind of instantiate and get right in the beginning. And it has to do with, from the funnel perspective, what are those touches that we're going to use to arrange awareness and to drive awareness? And then what are the touches that we're going to use from a marketing perspective, and then from a sales outreach perspective, et cetera. So getting, and there could be anywhere from 10 to 30 touches as part of this orchestration that are really need to be coordinated across all aspects, of the organization. So one of the first things that you have to do before you start to scale is make sure that you've got the right set of orchestrated touches kind of in place, and you've got the right message, you've got the right content that supports it, and perhaps kind of the right high value offer that leads to a meeting.
That's a great point, Jeff, and something we missed because we're very focused on sort of data and heuristics and all that stuff. But it's a really good point, which is if you don't have the automation or the orchestration piece down, even if you're performing, you go to scale, you're going to break a bunch of stuff. So I think it's a really, really excellent point, and something I think we should just say is sort of implied with that MVP phase, that you've got enough of the orchestration in place or are capable of delivering that orchestration so that when you do scale, you don't break stuff. So, Eric, I want to go back to you, and I want to talk about. I made a comment to open up this topic, and I said, "Gee, it was really clear for us when we needed to scale, but I don't know how true that was. I feel like it was a little bit more ambiguous for us when there was that moment of scale." And I'll just throw in there that for me it was feeling. And you mentioned this before, that we had reached a point of elasticity.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't maximizing what we wanted to maximize, but I was feeling like we could put activity in and pull activity out predictably. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, I'd say that's part of it. I'd say that feeling like we could start to ramp it and do more, right? But I think part of the feeling that like we could do that is that we also had a bit of an understanding of what it was going to take for our sellers to actually do. Like what bit of the orchestration side is like, when we look at a tranche, what are all the activities? How much time does it take? What do we need everybody to do? Do we have good processes in place to actually do those things on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, right? And so I'd say you're ready to start to scale when you kind of have an understanding of those tactics, the ordering of those tactics, and then the ability to sort of consistently execute on those tactics, month over month over month over month, right? Because if you can't keep if you can run it well for 3 sellers, right, but the tactics take them 100% of their time, that's not scalable because they've got other things to do. They got to close deals. So you got to make sure that you've got this thing built in a way that they can actually execute. And I think that's one of the things that we went really back and forth on. An example is, at one point in time, we're like, man, we need to do videos inside of here. We got to get these out. And that kind of broke it. It really took us running a tranche or two with that and be like, man, that doesn't scale. At least not the way we were doing it. Now, maybe we could go get better tools, do other things, but like the way we were running it was causing us to not get through our tranches in the time frame they wanted. So we had to back out of it. And then we looked at data, and luckily we had all this data. We said, okay, well, is it effective? Because if it's effective and it's not scalable, then you go try to figure out how to scale that tactic. You say, oh, let's go get another tool, another this, whatever to do it. But if you're looking at it saying like, it's taking a lot of time, but it's also not having much effect. That's where the data comes in. Then you say like, well, scrap it. Let's try something else, right? That's more scalable.
I think
or reduce it.
I think it's
something like that.
I think that you guys are making excellent points, and so let me recap because I want to move on to talking about mature emotions and then do hot takes and then get questions from the audience. So what I'm hearing is this: first of all, think about orchestration. And Eric, you were spot on. I have to say, it was and it continues to be sort of our twin stars: performance and scale. Specifically, can we scale without breaking stuff? And breaking stuff could be, as an example, on the digital front. Is the audience too big or too small? But also, how much time are the sellers spending? And then we had the great luxury, again, of being able to measure things quite often in real time. Great example were videos. We've used things like Sendoso spend. And we're going to get to this in the hot takes, but I would say, if you are worried about that and you are building a motion, if you're building an ABM channel, don't hesitate to lead into breaking stuff. That's not the lesson here. In other words, add those things in, but if they do start breaking stuff and they're not performing, then pull them. But if they are performing, that's when you're looking at orchestration, really, to Jeff's point.
Yeah. Automate them somehow.
Perfect.
Yeah, and
Okay,
just to
let's
build
talk
on that,
about
just one final thought, really. So it's really around experimentation, right? So as marketers, that we all know we need to experiment, and you have to have experimentation as part of your orchestrated set of touches, because as in Eric's example, some companies doing personalized videos can be the most awesome thing in the world. In other companies, it might not. You have to test it, and then you got to fail quickly and move on if it's not working.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so what I want to talk about now is I really want to lean into this idea of a mature account-based motion. And I feel like there's so many organizations still. I think ABM has been the thing for 10 years now, Jeff. I think it's about right. You know, I first started seeing tooling in 2012, so let's say 12 years. It's been the thing, but there's still a huge number of organizations that are just starting this journey. But there are even more that are in the middle of the journey. And so what I want to do is, first of all, let's talk about what a mature motion equals. And then what are signs of trouble that you've got a motion that could use some help? So Jeff, give us a definition of a mature motion.
Well, I guess first of all is that it's delivering, right? So whatever our targets are in terms of engagement, opportunities, and deals, you know, that it's delivering. So we have some sign of success, right? So that's high level. And then if you begin to parse it, you know, maybe you think about the different pieces of it, right? So you have an efficient way of identifying accounts and identifying the context within the account. In the initial stage, that's a really time-consuming activity. So you need to scale that. You need to get good at as part of that mature motion. Second stage is that you have to have the orchestrated set of tactics or activities, so all of the touches, and have that really tight and aligned so you can be efficient and effective, and you've got the right messaging and the right content that's going to drive that. And then maybe the third piece, and I'll talk about four pieces. The third piece is having that high value offer. So what is that thing that's really going to drive all this engagement to that meeting, which is really what we're trying to get to. And then the fourth piece I would put is around the reporting capability, right? So you have to have the ability to kind of keep your eye on all these things, to measure engagement, to measure results. So those are, I would say, are the four kind of components of a mature motion.
Okay. And then Jeff, you talked about mature also equaling, are you hitting the numbers you thought you would hit, even if you've revised those numbers over time, right? You've doubled it or halved it, whatever it is. You feel like you, to Eric's point, have elasticity. So, and I think we did a really good job talking about early sort of indicators and trailing indicators. So give me an idea of an example, Jeff, maybe in your experience with other clients, where there were sort of early indicators that there was trouble with a mature motion, or maybe just for folks that have those mature emotions, what should they be looking out for? Because I will tell you, my experience is it's the trailing indicators that alert people, and quite often it's happening much earlier than that. So trailing would be pipeline or bookings.
Yeah, so for sure, the first indicator is just engagement, right? So you've got all these touches going, you're reaching out to all the different buyer groups, and man, you want to see response, you want to see engagement. So if you're not seeing engagement, that's the first warning sign. But in my experience, typically you do see an uptick. Even if you haven't optimized your program and you're just getting started, you're going to see an uptick because you've got the right message to the right people. So typically you will see an uptick in engagement. But then I think the first trouble sign is if that engagement is not turning into meetings, right? Because that ultimately is the kind of first indicator of real success. So I would say the thing that I would really watch out for is that all of our activity is not turning into the number of meetings that we're planning for.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Campbell, you want to take us to hot takes and the Q&A? Take us home.
Yeah, I mean, I love me a hot take. Let's go around the table. Jeff, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I would say, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I would say that approach first, tools second. So tools are super important, right? And we've talked about how important they are for reporting and engagement. But I think a lot of companies get wrapped wrapped around the axle with the tooling and the thought that they need to have an ABM platform to get started. I think you can get started quickly without a tremendous amount of tooling, and then layer in the tooling as time goes on.
Doug.
I'm going to comment on what Jeff said. I agree with Jeff, and I'll give you my hot take as well. I've done that, Jeff. I've done that, and you become married to the ABM platform and the tactics. It sort of keeps you sort of bounded within those tactics. But I would say, don't hesitate. Like, we talked about scale, we talked about indicators of need to scale, elasticity, and we did a great job talking about how quite often you're going to break something if you're getting performance, but you don't have the orchestration. I would say lean into tooling that, but I would agree, don't start with tooling. That is a trap, and ABM organizations will absolutely sell you on that idea that you should start with tools. My hot take, and we've mentioned this a bunch, is there are no sacred cows, but your North Star is engagement. And I'm gonna use an example that Jeff gave, which is really, if we think about tactically, there are really two things you're looking at potentially addressing with an ABM motion. What's your high value offer? What's the hook? How are you going to get meetings? And if you have a product that is reasonably complex, how do you have a product on ramp? Those are sacred cows. And our experience has said that actually our strongest indicator was engagement. And in other words, some of those incremental steps towards higher engagement actually would outweigh the HVO tactic. So I take here is always optimize for engagement. Don't get too caught up if things like product on ramp and high value offer aren't working.
Eric.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is in line or not in line, Jeff, with what you said, but I would go with measure early, measure often. Like, as a CEO, I'm spending a fair amount of money on these programs. And I am looking to know whether or not it's working or not working for us as an organization, because we have, it's not just it's time, resources, effort, marketing teams focused on a sales team, right? If it's not working, you need to know early enough, right, to shift, right? And so if you're not measuring things, whether it's we use engagement as the proxy for measurement, but if you're not doing something to really measure and understand how it's performing for you over time, when your CFO or your CEO comes and says, like, show me what it's doing for us, how do you answer that question? And if you're waiting and you have a sales cycle that's 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, you may not show real evidence for 6 months to 12 months. And you want to keep this program really growing, you've got to be measuring what's going on, right? And the measurement's got to come in. So you got to understand what's really happening out there to understand whether or not this thing has been effective for you.
And before let's open for Q&A. So people please post in chat and Q&A, but I want to clarify really quickly, as we've been talking about engagement, we don't mean early funnel, like leads. We don't mean meetings. What we're talking about with engagement is you've invested in revenue operations, which is why we're all here. You've invested in your analytics platform, and you can actually see by account things like web activity, intent activity, those sorts of things, so that you can immediately see whether or not the targeted accounts are starting to interact.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that really quickly.
Yeah, I'll just kind of, in that area, we were measuring everything from, are they interacting with the ads? Are they seeing the ads? Are they interacting with the ads? Are they going to, sites to look at our product and other products, right? Are they hitting our website? Are they downloading content, right? All of these things are early indicators of engagement for us, which then flowed into, okay, are they doing meetings? Are they responding? Like, there's a whole plethora there. You got to be measuring the whole spectrum, right? I look at intent as like really early indicators, right? And there's different levels of intent, depending on who you're talking to, Bombora versus G2 or versus whatever, right? All the way through, are they engaging with you and your brand, right? You need to be able to measure it all.
And then you mentioned you were concerned it was like butting up against what Jeff said, but I think they complemented each other nicely, because Jeff and Doug, I got the impression you're thinking about specialized tool sets that help you execute ABM as opposed to the analytics infrastructure. Because I heard early on that measuring often is important. Do you want to clarify that or go into more detail?
Yeah, let me
Can I-
jump in for just one second here, because I think it's a really interesting idea, and it's probably a great topic for a future webinar. You know, is tooling and instrumentation for ABM. But I think that there's a minimum requirement. I think the minimum requirement is you have to have a marketing automation system, and you have to have some measurement system as a minimum thing to get started. So I absolutely agree with Eric with respect to the measurement component.
Well, I'm going to add a comment too before we get to Q&A. And so, Jeff, I agree with tooling. I agree, don't tool too early. But I'll tell you, this is my third go around with ABM. And I absolutely will not start another ABM motion without engagement data. Full stop. I just will not do it. And you know, it's not just about the fact that you know, at the end of the day, it's a product that was available to me because I was helping out with Calibermind and they had the product, but our ability to make decisions and move with speed, I feel like was almost entirely based on the fact that we had such rich engagement data through the entire process. And without that, I don't know how we would have pivoted and made all the decisions we made with such speed. It really is sort of the magic ingredient. So if you're starting this off, I agree, Jeff, have CRM, have all these other things, but please start with engagement data. It's going to make your life so much easier.
So I think Stephanie asked a question and you answered a small part of it, but the first question is, what is the makeup of your ABM activation team? So who from marketing and sales is participating? Let's start with just the pilot.
I mean, I can answer from our side. I mean, yeah, pretty top down. I mean, obviously, I mean, first of all, you need to have your leadership team heavily engaged. If you're trying to kind of run this below your leadership team without them really heavily engaged, you know, I don't know if it's going to work, because you've got to have people who are really willing to move resources around to make this stuff happen, right? That they're willing to dedicate. Okay, we're going to have 2 salespeople. Now we're going to have 4. Now we're going to have this, and they can get resources kind of moved around to execute and change the priority of projects, right? So I would say you need a leadership team, and you need both sales and marketing engaged really heavily. You know, they need to be working really closely together. So on our side, we started with myself, Doug, obviously. We started with sales. We started with marketing. We started with a couple of sellers to pilot it. And then over time, we started expanding that out within our organization.
Yeah, and I think the other, yeah, exactly. I did like that we started small with just a couple sellers. I thought that's effective. So the activation team for us was really, if you will, senior leadership. And by the way, that senior leadership was quite involved. Like, we were sometimes reviewing ad copy together. We were actually sometimes reviewing copy together. And part of that was, the reason I highly recommend that, and again, some of the large organizations, it's going to be tough to pull your CMO in, but do it. Because what's happening is you're getting an indicator from the leadership to say, this is important. But also you're giving them an idea of just how complex those motions are and how sort of interdependent they are.
It goes back to the thought that that ABM is a strategy, not a tactic. You have to have leadership involved for that reason, for all the reasons you guys have talked about.
Yeah.
And I think another question was, how do you bring these things to fruition quickly? So your high value offer, your ads, all of that. And I think you guys are speaking to it nicely with having the executives involved in pushing on that and prioritizing it and moving around resources. But do you have anything else to add to that one point?
The only thing of that gets to the second. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Well, go ahead, Eric, and then I would love to hear from Jeff, because I feel like the thing that Jeff really helped us understand is how important design was.
Yeah.
How critical design was. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I'll kind of go, and this gets kind of the second question here. Did we have? Yeah, so we have people inside the organization who are basically I want to say the point of contact. They are responsible for making sure that pulling all the programs together, monitoring all the stages, basically a project manager internally to kind of manage this outside of, you know, being one of the actual people executing on these programs directly, right? So we do have that. But I think it's also critical that you have somebody that's in a RevOps or data analytics position or something like that. Again, it gets back to measuring and showing the data. Somebody's got to be responsible for making sure that data is being pulled together, is shared, and all that. How often do we share it? Weekly. I mean, we have a meeting every week on ABM, and the first thing we do is we bring up the analytics and reports and we say, how are things working? What worked last week? How are things progressing? What are we doing? And we look at it nonstop.
And then I would advocate for embedding them in this process so they understand what you're trying to achieve, what indicators you're trying to see, and then can add some value around adding insights and not just pulling up a report.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I know we're at almost time, so I just want to hit a final point without having Jeff to weigh in on this. But Jeff, the thing that I've learned and will carry forward with ABM is you can't overinvest in design. Really spend the time there, and it's not going to be perfect, and things are going to blow up from here and there. But really spend the time in design to make sure that that activation is as smooth as it can be.
Yeah, agreed. And it comes down, to the MVP, piece as well, is start in a very focused way with that minimum viable, program, get the design right, keep the team lean, and keep the tooling lean as well, so we can kind of build out that design and get some initial success.
Well, we're at time, but I want to thank you all for sharing your perspectives, because I think a lot of us in revenue operations don't get to see the decision making behind all of this that always happens. So we appreciate it. Everyone have an excellent day, and we will catch you next time. Have a good one.